It's going to be a super important video, this one, when setting up your Supercoach team in an overall standpoint or a head-to-head there. We're going to be going through the overall winning strategy first and then going through the head-to-head. And a bunch of it will transfer over, and then I'm replacing a few of the points in this first one with a bunch of extra points for the head-to-head section. So when you're kicking things off in your squad, what you need to look at is the trades to kick things off. So there's 46 there with 5 boosts available. So that doesn't give you any extra trades. It just gives you that one extra based on whatever the trades allowed is for that week. So for the majority of weeks, it is 2, and then the major buy rounds, you get 3. So you would be able to use that extra one in that first, in any of those weeks that you'd like there. It equates to 1.76 trades per week there, given you have 26 weeks that you can trade, which is cool. It's a decent amount of trades, and what we want to be doing early is actually to use those trades quickly, but it's really only to fix mistakes and capitalize on any of those early season cash cows that are going to set your team up well for a cash generation standpoint, but also to get you plenty of good points in your sort of 14th, 15th, 16th, 17th playing player with those decent cash cows that are making decent points for your overall team, and then also the cash generation that you get from them. That also includes the value guys, which are going to make up the bulk of that mid part of your best 17. And then obviously your top guns in there aren't really in there to gain you any sort of cash there. They're there to be there for a long time and get you good points, and hopefully you're not trading them out too much across that first sort of 13 rounds, and then you can kind of play around with things come the bye period when there's a lot of teams on a bye there in round 13 and beyond. So round 3 really looks like a decent week to use a boost if you did miss out on any of those cows as well. So with the first week there of price changes in round 3, or after round 3 there, that's when you want to be looking at making sure you capitalize on those guys that may be going up sort of 80 to 100k in this first section of the year. Number 2 there, you want to look at the best 13 of the 17 scorers in round 13, 16, and 19. So last year, this was the first time that we had this type of schedule and this type of scoring in those weeks. And then now we have some data on it. And it was fairly simple, in my opinion, to get 13 out of your 25 available players on the park during that week if you were thinking ahead just a little bit, because you only needed to sort of change probably 5 or 6 players there heading into round 13. Usually if you just didn't even think about it and just went about your business, you'd have about 7 guys available in sort of round 9, 10 there, getting yourself closer to that round 13. And unless sort of injuries and the like came up, or in those next few weeks you traded out a few buy-friendly players, you were sitting in that easily position there, 7, 8, 9, pretty comfortably. So if you're thinking ahead, it's fairly easy to get 13 on the park. What I wanted to talk about here was just sort of going above this mark here of 13, which I did a couple of times last year. I believe in round 13 I had 15 players. I think one of the other times I had 16, and really it only gives you a sort of a small benefit there. So you have 13 playing in that week. In every other week you have 17 playing in as your scorers, and to make up your total allotment of points for that week. So really it's only a small benefit being able to take a 50 over a 25, from the 13th scorer compared to your 14th or 15th scorer from a bench guy, for example. And where I saw the flaw with having the 14 to 15 was in the following round, where not overloading on these major buy round guys, when I'm talking like around 13 only, they might have a buy in round 14, for example, for that guy, or they're available 13, 14, which is much better. You obviously get that good score for both, which could be cool. But if you're targeting those guys to cover those big buys, I don't think they're the hardest to cover, in my opinion. In round 14, when you have 17 men on the park, I think it's going to be much more important. And it's less important to overload on the 13 guys, and a little bit more important to focus on making sure you have that good 17 in the round following that big buy. So meaning you could have and want to have an incredible 17 on the park in round 14, 17, and 20. So if you do the maths here, getting a score of 1,200 and beating other teams by 100, with them getting 1,100 there in round 14, whilst keeping your team a little bit more intact with some more final team guys, etc. Because if you're looking to make sure you get a lot of good guys for 13, you're usually making a few extra trades, and they might be guys that you don't exactly want in your final team, or they could be a bit of a poorer player for round 16 bye, which could be helpful for you, or 17 and the like from there. And obviously the 2 rounds, the round in between in round 15, it'll be very important to have a certain type of player. And if you've overloaded on 13, it can hurt you there as well. Compared to if you were to score 850 in round 13 there and beat your opponents by 50 points, having them score 800. I just think this is a really, really important thing to focus on, given it's, you have 25 players to choose from to get 13 on the park. It's not super difficult. Yes, you might beat out other coaches that have the 15 players, but I think you're going to beat them out in the longer run in those minor bye weeks where 17 on the park is going to be a bigger winner for you. And then some of those guys that overload in round 13 probably don't have that stronger side in that next one. Number 3 on the list. So the hooker position that is, the halfback, the 5'8", and also the fullback, the 2 player positions there. What you need to focus on there, if your gun starter has a bye in sort of the next 3 or 4 rounds, whether it's at any point in the season, whether it's in round 1, like a Harry Grant or Jeremy Marshall-King in the hooking position. It could be in round 7 when they have a bye coming up in the next 3 or 4. Try not to have or trade in a mid-price / cheapie, somewhere around that 300 to 400k mark that isn't scoring super well. They're likely to score sort of 20 plus points less. And if you're doing that a bunch of times over the season, or that player has a bye and that guy covers and scores you sort of a 30 or 40 compared to a 60 or 70 that you could have got from your starter. If you're doing that regularly, it may not seem like much, but you do this 7 times over the season and there's anywhere from like 140 to 200 points easily that you're missing out on. So definitely try to think ahead, and in those positions, make sure that you've either got someone that has a really long period without a bye so that you don't have to tap into that secondary scorer. Or if you know that in the next 3 or 4 weeks that player has a bye, that you are looking to trade in someone, or you have plans, or you did have plans before this anyway, of kind of building up enough funds that you could buy a secondary gun in that position. So let's just say it is the 5'8" position. It's the one that has guys that could potentially move into gun status. And if that was the case, you could trade out your KO weeks or something like that in that time so that you can cover Dylan Brown's big point scoring. You can have someone that's a pretty decent point scorer in that 5'8" position when he has that bye. So that's just a very simple example to go off there. If you went a Blake Brayley in the hooking position, then by round 5 there, when Hines has his bye, you have someone that can come in and score just as well or close to it, so you're not giving up that many points there. The vice captaincy loophole, it is such an important part of the game, guys. In most rounds, you will have someone on the bye. So this is very, very helpful for you to be able to even have an opportunity to use the vice captain loophole. So making sure you at least put your VC on a high upside player playing early. They could be a guy that isn't consistently in that 60 to 80 range, but they could be like a 40 guy, or they could be 100 and something guy. And that's exactly what you want in a VC, because if they do score the 120, then you're very, very likely to be taking that. And I'll explain why in a second. Big Supercoach rounds come off the back of big captaincy scores. And if you're getting 100 plus in that and locking that in, that is super important for you to do well on a weekly basis. You do see the top Supercoach players each and every year. They have really, really good vice captain loops. They have great captaincy choices as well. And just getting a second crack at it is very, very important. So just remember that your captain can have bad games. They can get injured. They can get sin bin. There's a lot can happen for them. So 100 plus VC scores are absolute gold and are a safe lock in your team, even if you have to take a 20 to 30 auto emergency. And we saw games last year where Nico Hines scored like a 95, or you had like a Cody Walker scored a 95. I know personally I did. I had Cody Walker with that 95 in that game, and then had Cleary as my captain. And I didn't take the 95, and I do think I would have ended up with maybe like 20 points less from my auto emergency compared to my 17th best player. And Cleary comes out and does his hamstring. So these kind of things can happen. I had a captaincy week where Tom Trbojevic got a 40 or 30 odd, I believe, earlier on in the season, where if I looked at getting a good vice captaincy, I could have avoided that Tom Trbojevic low score. Yes, these guys can go nuts and sometimes you can miss out, but the safety of having that VC score locked in is awesome. Number 5 there. Where is the potential big value is something you need to ask yourself. So I've got a bit of a list here. The hooking position, potentially there's 1 to 2 options with sort of 10 to 20 points upside. You're looking at the the Brayleys and the Hands and these types of players, or whoever gets that eel spot. A smaller amount of value in the top guys like a Jeremy Marshall-King. From row forward, you've only really got a few up to about that 15 points value max. There's no one that clearly stands out as a top tier guy that could, or even a value guy that could move into gun status at this point, I don't think. In the 2RF, there's likely to be 5+ options with sort of 15+ points of upside for sure. We know a lot of those mid-range guys that we're looking at, and what I'm getting at here is where the potential big value is to where to slot these types of guys in those positions, and then likely to go for some guns in the other positions there. So if value's in the 2RF, I'm going to be going for value in the 2RF, not spending up in that position. Halfback, probably 1 to 2 with some small value. So again, could be worth having a double gun strategy. 5/8, only a few up to sort of that 15 points value max. So yeah, not too much there. Maybe one cheaper or a value guy with a gun. Center wing, I've got 2 to 3 options with potentially 15+ upside. The Taylor Mays, these types of guys, and we'll see who pops up in the meantime. The fullback position, probably one option with 15+ value, and that's Jaden Campbell there. I'd say in that fullback slot / 5/8 slot, you can look at there. The next question you need to ask yourself is, where is the high upside scoring? So the chance of hundreds, and I've listed a bunch of the guys here that I think could go well. In Grant up top, he has that upside obviously, and it's likely to be a cheap / gun mix, so one of each. In the front row forward, Haas, Tino, and AFB both have that upside for sure. So I'm looking to go cheaper with sort of 3 out of the 4 and potentially go up a little bit higher in a higher value type of play to a gun. In the 2RF position, Fafita has the high upside clearly, so I'm going value in 2RF. There's only one option for Fafita with a buy in round 2. Halfback, you've got Hines, Cleary, Johnson, DCE, Hughes, and Moses. So plenty of options there. 6 of them that could do really well and have that really high upside. So I think you go hard in the halfback position, given there wasn't too much value there. 5/8, you got Brown and Munster, likely with the highest upside, so probably a cheap and a gun mix there. In the centre wing, there's plenty. You got sort of 8 or 9 guys there. Marzu, Osako, Gagai, Holmes, Garrick, To'o, DWZ, Graham, and Tungo, I think have that clear high upside of 100+ there. So likely to go for a mix of a gun and a sort of a value cheapy kind of stature there, given you've got lots of positions in the center wing, but it's definitely a high upside position. Fullback, Ponga, Drinkwater, Trbojevic, Walsh, Gutho, Mitchell, Tedesco, and Pap. So I think in the fullback position, you look to go pretty hard with those guys that have the super high upside that could do really well in your side there. So that's just something to look at, both of those positions. Where's the value in the cheapies and where's the high upside scoring, and mix enough of both in your team should help you do really, really well. The last one there, so start setting up 4 buys from about round 7. And what I want you to try and look at there is looking to have sort of a core 12 that's going to take you through the majority of the buy period there before you set yourself up for your final team into the final sort of 6 or 7 rounds there for your head-to-heads or your overall, depending on where you're at that stage of the season. But what you're looking at here is sort of the majority of these guys are looking to be final season keepers or close to it. There might be 3 of them you're like, okay, they're just for the buy period only. They have a really good stretch of games, and you could reuse them there. But the other guys, you're hoping to keep them in your team for the entirety, and therefore you have a few less trades that you have to use in the back end to get to that gun 17. And obviously, if you've used a fair chunk of trades throughout the beginning to middle of the season and through that buy period, that's something you need at the back end and you want to hope for, especially with round 27, knowing how many of these guys have a rest, that we need a few trades up our sleeve or a really, really deep squad. So these are guys, as I said, they're scoring well in each of your weeks there. Obviously, they might have a buy in one of them, but then they might be really, really helpful and get you a massive score in the next 3, right? So that's something to look at, that you're having pairings with guys that are good for maybe round 13 and 19, and then you have guys in your team that are really good for sort of round 14, 16, 17, something like that to pair them, which is really cool, and you can waste less trades, that's for sure. So whenever you have a buy in one week, as I said, you don't have to trade them out, but ensure they're a big scorer or helper in the next few rounds. It's about the collection of points over the entire 8-round period. not the scores in those individual rounds, in my opinion there. So this strategy saves trades for you and ensures you aren't sitting with sort of 3 to 5 cheapy level scores in all of those rounds each and every week, because that's an absolute shocker if you get to that point, and that's where you're at there, unfortunately. Okay, that's the overall strategy, guys. There could be potentially some more stuff in there. If I forgot anything, please let me know in the comments if you think I should add anything, and we'll obviously go through that and speak about that in our content from here on in. For the head-to-head winning strategy, so everything above is going to be used for the head-to-head strategy, except for the buy prep and the strategy chat there in points 2 and 7. And we're going to replace those two with the high team value is everything. So really, your team simply cannot compete if by finals time you have an extra, other teams cannot simply compete if you have an extra 600k team value on your opponent. That's the difference really between having sort of 3 55 to 60 point scorers that are like good, but not exquisite, and then 3 75 point scorers who usually have a little bit more upside in certain head-to-head matchups, could go 100 plus and then have that floor somewhere around the 50, which is going to be really, really cool. So that's the most important part, and we'll speak about how we can get to that high team value just now. So you get there by focusing on not missing out on the correct cash cows and the value guys along the way. So you definitely don't win the comp in March, Dragons? But missing out on the bullers of the world, even though most people prefer to go double gun strategy in the fullback position, it is a mistake, because it's a mistake you cannot make in head-to-head, that's for sure. Even if he only made 250k instead of sort of the 400 to 500k that he made last year, if you're not doing that, that's very, very hurtful for your side, because 250k is a lot, and there's not a hell of a lot of great cash cows each and every year. You have some guys that make good amount of money like him, like the Bryce Cartwrights and Prestons, but there's plenty of other poor cash cows that we end up in our sides, and anything around that 200 plus k mark is absolute gold. And it's better to get that extra cash to the middle of the year, especially like when you have buys potentially, you're going to have buys in your head-to-head matchups there, having Buller in there making you the money, and you don't have to worry about even if he had a bit of a lower score in one of those weeks, those 3 weeks there in the major buys, you're not even counting him as a scorer anyway. You're just getting his cash generation, and that's what you got to focus on during those rounds. So due to you not trading anywhere near as much over the buy period and targeting a certain type of player, you can pick up that value cashy who has sort of an unfavorable buy schedule that overall coaches would leave to the side. Guys like Randall last year, etc., can pop up across the season that you could jump on that overall coaches didn't, just because they were trying to conserve some trades. You can get those guys that end up with a cheeky roll through the middle of the season or the back end, maybe the sort of that 18 to round 22 as that kind of final cash cow for you, that can score pretty well as well, and then you can move them to a top tier gun. So it's definitely something to note. That cash generation might be sort of in round 10, 11, 12, 13. Maybe they miss 13, but round 14 is another good one for them, and overall coaches avoid them. You can go for those guys. Number 3, you're targeting keepers who have 2 out of their 3 buys in round 13, 16, and 19. So the 3 rounds that you have a buy in your head-to-head matchups, these are the type of players that you want to have in your side, because they're going to be missing 1 buy elsewhere. If they're an origin type of player, they may get rested or have limited minutes in like around 14, 17, 20. That would be fine, because you haven't got a keeper that misses sort of 4 or 5 games, including origin, across these periods. And really, if you can only miss 1 or 2 across all the games, all the rounds that you actually have a league matchup, then that's awesome compared to missing 4 or 5 across that time. So that's really, really important. So they only miss that smaller amount. Guys like Cleary and Haas fit this mold, especially as origin players, but obviously focusing on this for non-origin keepers as well, to keep your best 17 on the park at all times in those rounds where you have a matchup. So Cleary and Haas both have 2 buys in that round 13 to 19 period in 2 of those 3 weeks, I should say, which is very, very helpful for you guys in making sure that your captains and top players are going to be on the park. Number 4, 2 to go, guys. Always have the goal of accumulating top tier players actively. So you're actually looking at this each and every week, and how can I get another top gun upside scorer in my side that can take a head-to-head matchup away from my opponent. So the overall strategy, we look to be getting great buy round guns. Whereas these guys, where you're just looking for the best person in the position you need, in the position you need / the position you're lacking the most points and upside in at the time. And yeah, so they might be looking at a guy that's probably a tier below the top tier, just because of the favorable buy schedule. Whereas you don't have to worry about that. You just look at getting the best player in your position that you think that you can get the most points out of for the longest period of time in your head-to-head matchups, and obviously can help you in your head-to-head finals as well. So, and really you want to be keep chipping away until you have multiple good options in each position at the end of the season to be able to win any type of matchup. Whether it's a certain player has a really favorable matchup in that week and that team's kind of flying, and then the other player that you've got, their team's starting to struggle a little bit. The opportunities might be a little bit lower. They still score decent, but they don't have that upside. You can pick and choose which one you want to play. And then the final one, guys, so check which teams have buys in round 23, 24, 25, and 26, which is the normal head-to-head finals time for you, and just keep an eye on it for sure. So really just be careful bringing in top tier guns who have a buy during those weeks, unless you've saved the trades to trade them out in those weeks, which would be my suggestion. Have a look at those guys. Make sure it does just say it's round 14 and you're like, oh, they have a buy in round 25, which is my semi-final if I make it. Don't worry about that too much. It's still 12 or 11 rounds away or whatever that is. And you want a good scores over that whole time. But if you actually keep trades in the bank, if it gets to that round 25, you have the ability to trade that player, use that cash to get another top tier gun at that time. So if you've wasted trades, you can't do it. If you haven't wasted trades, then you have that option, which I suggest is the best way to go about it. So having multiple trades per week in the final 4 rounds is an absolute non-negotiable. You need to have a minimum 2 trades per round for those final 4 to 5 rounds. So anywhere between 8 and 10 rounds for that last couple is essential. That means in round 27, you probably don't have to worry about having all those restings, and you don't need to save trades for that final round unless you're looking to obviously win your head-to-heads, but then still do well in overall, and you've got goals in that as well. Then maybe you keep an extra couple of trades for round 27 as well. But that's basically where we're at with the strategies here, guys. So have a clear plan with what you're going to do with these guys, how you're going to save trades, and set yourselves up on a really good note to be able to have a absolutely cracking Supercoach season, whether you're playing overall, head-to-head, trying to mix both together. It's going to be so much fun, and I really hope this was helpful for you guys in getting the best out of your Supercoach season, doing really well, and having plenty of fun along the way. Hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you got a lot out of it, and we'll see you in the next one.